I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
Good somming for me is, hey, I'm looking at this bottle, but I've had it before. Is there anything else that you can recommend that you think is just as good? I think it's a beautiful opportunity to just open up a conversation about wine.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Wil Martin serves as the Group Sommelier at Stokehouse Precinct. As a leader in hospitality, Wil oversees the beverage program and a team of sommeliers to deliver exceptional restaurant experiences. Today he joins me to tell me what it's like to be the one who brings the drinks. Hi Wil, thanks for joining me.
Hey Shanteh, thanks for having me on here.
It's a total delight. Like I said to you earlier, I've heard lots about your wonderful service, and it's really nice always to have a fellow sommelier join the podcast. I'd like to know, I know a little bit about you and your history, but I don't know about how you came into the business. So tell me a little bit about, where does your story begin? Where did you even grow up?
Well, this is it's funny because when you start out, you're generally so young, and hospitality is never really a career that is at school or in or a university. So I grew up in a place just west of Brisbane called Ipswich, which for those who know Ipswich, there's not a huge there wasn't when I was growing up a huge hospitality scene, and definitely no wine drinking. So the benefit of growing up in somewhere like Ipswich, apart from having amazing, very hardworking parents, is that you've always got this thirst that one day that you can go out and kind of discover and see new things. So I guess the first job I got, I remember, was at the local supermarket, as most teenage kids start. And I remember I was one of the checkout chicks, and if you're allowed to say that, but I was one of the checkout chicks, and I came from, mum and dad, they were very kind of meat and three veg kind of family, and I remember just trying to scan these fruit and vegetables that I just never heard of before. And you've got the customer in front of you that knows exactly what it is, and so you kind of have to then open a dialogue to ask them, what is this, and then charge them correctly. So that got me started to actually getting a bit of curiosity about food, and it's actually a really good way to start actually interacting with grown-ups, because it's really hard to, as a teenager, to actually have an adult conversation with someone that you're not related to. So that kind of got me through high school, and then as much as I loved high school, there was no real thought to go into. I kind of saw through all the university courses. Both my siblings all went through university, and there was just nothing really appealing to me. But my parents were big travellers, and they were always very supportive of any of my choices. And so I thought, I think the best way for me to figure out, what's going on is to go travelling after school. So that was probably the first big steps for me to actually leave Ipswich and see what was going on in the world, which was lovely.
I can kind of, draw a lot of parallels to kind of what you're saying. And I think only a very reflective person would look back and say, my time as a checkout chick really helped me in my social skills and dealing with adults, because I can totally understand that, And I think that even to this day, grocery shopping can be some of the most mundane tasks, but I always make an effort to try and have a little bit of a chat to the person, even if it's just something to make them laugh, because I do think, it can be quite tiresome doing that kind of stuff. So I think it's amazing that you've even reflected that much to look at that what that taught you as a skill. When you decided to go out into the big world, as Australians do, it's a very expensive flight to leave. Where did you head off to?
So instead of catching a flight, I actually saved up my money and bought a 1973 Volkswagen Combi, which was at the time, a very smart decision to buy a rundown old van, which is now thinking back of it, the amount of issues we had with it. But so I was fresh 17, 18, so I picked it up, and then because I wanted to see Australia before I saw the other parts of the world. So, a couple of other friends went over to Europe with a couple of people went to America, and I thought, you know what, I'd be pretty embarrassed to not really understand my own country before and then going across to another country and then kind of pretending like I know everything about Australia. So I bought a van and had no job planned and drove north, which is a lot of agriculture. So I did a lot of fruit picking, and at that time, and still is, that you've got the visa regulations where all the backpackers have to do fruit picking to gain an extra year visa, which, as much as they hate, I loved it, because you're picking tomatoes with 8 different nationalities, and you're really getting exposed to how everyone perceives the world and what they're doing, just traveling, and you get that bug of what's going on in the world, and just, I think it's just different personalities of different countries of people. So again, it's hard for someone who's never been around someone from Ireland, and then someone from Italy and French and all that, and so you get a little insight into what each country is about, which again furthered my thirst to finally go over there. And I was working on this farm for maybe 2 months, and we got to the end of the season, and all the farmers, who you can imagine, the North Queensland farmers, as lovely as they are, they kind of just went around and said, "Oh, so where's everyone from?" And so everyone kind of said it, and then they pointed to me and they said, "Well, what country are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from Ipswich in Queensland." And they go, "Yeah, but are you French? Or we all thought you were French." So I kind of got a bit blown back, because you always think that you're Australian, but there's different parts of the country where you're not perceived as Australian as you could be, I guess. So that was pretty exciting for me to, one, almost have this imagination that I was not Australian, because when you're young, you wish you were something a bit exotic. But now I'm really actually happy that he said that, because I'm not perceived as a North Queenslander. And being from Southern Queensland, I don't want to start any political things here, but so from that gave me the urge to go over to London, or over to the UK, and they had a brilliant working scheme that you could get a job for £5 an hour, and they'll provide your accommodation for free. Which was, as a 19-year-old, was fantastic. It was, once all overheads are covered, and £5 an hour is definitely enough money to survive in a new city.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I think that it's so cool that you decided to go see Australia. It often takes Aussies a long time to want to travel around their own country and really understand it, even to the point, I'd say, of retirement. So amazing that you went and had those experiences early on. Do you think that changed, how you felt about your country?
At the time, no, but every year that goes past, it is, out of all the travelling I've ever done, it is actually some of the most precious memories I have, especially of Australia, but just the landscape alone. Like, the benefit of travelling in a van is, and I mean, Australia is so vast that you can turn up to a town, and if you don't quite like it, you can just drive to the next town, and there's some places that they're completely off the beaten track, scarily, and you can be sitting on this beach with, that no one is within 2 hours drive of you, and you've got this massive moon just right on the horizon, and you've got just endless water and beaches and everything, and there's just something. It's probably the most alone I've ever felt, but in a good way. It was kind of the most connection I've ever felt. and as the world, as your career and your life and your relationships build, it's just so rare to be able to get that feeling of you've got nowhere to be and you're all by yourself and you're just enjoying your surroundings. And being in Australia doing that was fantastic.
What beautiful memories. I think that early adulthood, late teenage years, early adulthood, we have some of the most poignant moments that we remember for the rest of our lives, whether it be that our emotions are just so high and or low. But I think that there are moments that you remember forever, and to have those, that's amazing. I think it's kind of funny to explain it to people, that perhaps come over and we look at our sunburnt country and our outback and it's all dry and brown and we're like, oh, look at that. And they're like, it's pretty mediocre. But for me, it's awesome. So tell me about travels overseas. What were your first impressions?
Well, I don't want to go too far into Europe because firstly, I can't remember much of it because as an early 20-year-old with a leash on life in Europe, there is a lot of drinking and a lot of late nights. So from what I remember, all I remember is just that first independence of being so far away from your family, and you really had to just, and coming from that really hardworking family, and my dad always had this ethos, just if you ever get stuck, just work your way out of it. So it was any time I got stuck, I just threw myself into work and worked ridiculous hours and picked up extra shifts and extra money, which in that time in your life just means it opens up more travel and more experiences. But I was working mostly in the old pubs where you're using real ales and you're talking the tapping the kegs and just an old traditional styles of pub, which you never really saw over in Australia because everything's all those aluminium kegs and it's all pretty mechanized. So again, working in hospitality, I've always ever worked in hospitality, but just working in pubs and just seeing how how the Brits perceive drinking is really nice to see. It's I guess not necessarily on the focus on the alcohol, but just as it's more of the friendship and more of, instead of going for dinner and catching up with everyone, you go after work every day to the pub for a drink, and there's nothing really to do at home, so you might as well go out and enjoy, a couple of beers and go home, which was refreshing coming from Australian culture. Where you go and at our age was how much can you drink in a short amount of time for as the least amount of money as possible. So from that, I went, did a fair bit of traveling around Europe and just seeing the architecture. And I remember just going to Italy for the first time and just being obsessed with the doors, because all the intricacies of the doors and then all the architraves and just the stones and the parts, and just being blown away just by the history of it. And it was amazing. So I spent a bit of time over in Europe, and then it kind of got to a stage where you just get sick of living out of a suitcase or a backpack, and you kind of want to push your life forward a bit. So I thought I'd come back to Ipswich after that.
And on return, I mean, I understand that too. I spent about 6 years overseas, and on return, I thought, I want to do something. I want to put down a bit more roots, maybe make things a bit more permanent. And it's always nice to return home. Did you have a plan when you came home? Did you think, okay, I know what I want to do now. This is how I'm going to go about it. What was your approach when you came home?
Absolutely no plan whatsoever. There was zero plan, which, a lot of people, you talk to them, they've always had that dream and urge and how can I get to this place and everything. And I guess I was always more about the opportunities, and you can never force opportunities. And you just have to pick and choose about which is the right opportunity to take and be comfortable with that decision. And one of the most addictive things about hospitality is that you can just so easily float in and out. So I just knew coming back I'd be able to get a job pretty easy because it's hospitality. You can just slip in and do whatever job, and then once you get a bit of a base, and then you can get some friendships within the industry, then you can take that next step from there. So that was always my approach to either learning a city or learning what my next step would be, is to just jump into a restaurant and get the lay of the land of the city. And when you're working that much, you really value your days off, and you build these beautiful friendships with people around you that are doing a similar thing. So I went and worked in a beautiful old institutional Italian restaurant in Brisbane, with two pretty young operators that they'd taken the restaurant over from their parents. So it was a very family-run place, which I love working for family-run places. And any extra hours you're doing, you can actually see who it's going to, and they treat you really well, and so you kind of reciprocate with giving them the work and the hours and the respect to their business. So I worked for them, and then after I was, they put me up to manager, which, it's an Italian restaurant in Brisbane. A manager, I think, just means that you work full time and take on responsibility. And back in the days where everything was cash, I just remember just having to count the amount of cash that was there because there was no FPOS. And thinking back at that, I haven't really thought about it until now, but just thinking how much cash you had to count every night, it's pretty daunting. And then they said there's an opportunity for, they want to do a little cafe or something with me. So we started a cafe together. They were my kind of silent business partners, and they said, you just take it on and you just do what you do. So I started a little cafe in Brisbane, which was probably the best of the worst times of my life, I'd say, because you can't really walk away from your business. But the worst thing is that you can't go and get any more experience anywhere, because you can't work for someone else to get experience to enhance your own business. So it was a really good lesson for me because there's always that, you always want to own your own place in hospitality, and this mentality that you can only be successful if you own your own place. So I jumped in there, and it was it would have been about 2008, just before the GFC, and it was right in the middle of the city. And all the corporate offices around us just kind of collapsed and moved out, and we had some legal issues with the landlord that they didn't want us to go, and we wanted to sell it, and it was a really tricky exercise because they were here saying that they really don't want us to go, so they wouldn't reassign a lease and all this kind of thing just to keep us there. So in terms of business, it was a really good learning curve for me to understand that, hey, owning your own place isn't the be-all and end-all of being successful in hospitality.
I mean, you said that so casually. I started my own little place. Like, that's massive. 2008. Do you mind if I ask, how old were you then?
I would have been, mathematics isn't in my age, isn't my strong point. From off the top of my head, I would have been probably 22, 23.
That's insane.
So 23, 24 I would have been. Yeah, correct.
Oh my gosh, that is so young to go, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I mean, but props to you, because I've worked in cafes as well, and they're a funny little business, and yes, it does take a bit to make a bit of money as well. So pretty fascinating that you did that at such a young age. I mean, what a go-getter.
Well, I just had this mentality that if people were going to come in and buy coffee, and I would just be my personal self, and I love talking to people, and I love, I guess, the art of hospitality, of your tiny little impact on their day can really impact their whole week and their life to a certain degree. Your morning coffee. I think I maybe picked that up in that Italian culture, just watching all the old guys have an espresso at the bar, and in Italy you have the espressos and you go, the coffee's not that good. Like it's pretty good. And everyone says, the best coffee in the world is in Italy, but you have it and you go, this espresso's not that good. And then you look further and you go, why is everyone here then? And it's literally just to talk to the guy behind the bar because he is such a personable, beautiful human being that they just go and have the coffee and it's more for the conversation. So I tried to replicate that in a small sense, but it's very, very early mornings and it's long days and in winter in particular where you're 5 a.m. and then the sun's gone down by the time you've packed up and left. And, there was only really myself and whoever I could afford. And so, yes, and you bring up a good point about it's very hard to make money in coffee. So that was also a very good lesson.
Yes, slim margins on food and coffee. I think that I learned how to, whip around a floor pretty damn quick in a tight apron when I worked in a cafe. And I think that that's definitely a skill. So, lots of skills, but lots of lessons. Let's fast forward. You're out of cafes now and you did try your hand at being a chef at one point.
Yeah, correct. So going back to that, having your own business and being, I guess, handcuffed with information. And I said, well, if I do start another business, I want to know everything about, I want to be able to understand every aspect of the business. And I've always really enjoyed cooking. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a go at chefing because if I can understand the chefing side of things, then I can understand exactly what they're talking about, or they won't take me for the chefs won't take you for a ride as they did in the Italian restaurant I worked at. And, you never really understand what they're doing. So I tried my hand at a friend's restaurant and it's a really nice restaurant and they've got beautiful clientele and a really nice little space. So nice little Italian restaurant in Brisbane in a more upper class area. So it was really interesting and it was fun because you thought you worked really hard until you worked in a kitchen with chefs, and then they are the hardest workers of nearly any industry and they do it without complaining. And the only reason why they don't complain is because they're too busy. So it was really, initially it was really good working in that environment where everyone is on the same page, everyone's got the same goal and the same outcome and working so hard just to put something on the plate. I think people forget when they go to a restaurant how hard it is just for that one item to leave the kitchen to go to the table. So it was, I chefed for not life, I was probably just over a year and a half at this place. And then a friend of mine moved back from London. He was one of the junior sous chefs at the Square in London. And he wanted to start a family restaurant and he had no money. And so I said I'd work for him on a very good rate if he showed me technique and how they do it in the Michelin star restaurants. So I did that, which was a horrible decision. In hindsight, it's a very, very good decision. But you're the dishwasher, you're on cold ladder, hot ladder, and then you're doing desserts in between, and then you're washing the pans for him on the mains in between, and you're trying to replicate fine dining food with three of you with 60 covers a night. So that was it was and one little, it was, I think, what pushed me over the, and I stuck it out for a fair while. And the one moment where I thought, you know what, because I really want to go to Melbourne, but the one thing was when we'd finished at 1:30 in the morning, and it was such a big day. It was, I don't know if it was a Mother's Day or something like that, and we're just about to leave, and then all the drains in the kitchen just started coming up. And I'm not quite sure if you've ever had that smell of stagnant water coming through drains in a kitchen. It's a very correct, and it's a unique smell, and your hands, elbows, and everything is. So I think we got out of there about 3 a.m. and we sat down and had a beer, and the guys learning off, I was so envious of what he'd done. And we sat down and I just wanted to have a conversation with him, but all he could go back to talk to was about food. And I understand, but I kind of looked through it and said, well, he's at the actual peak of his career, but he's just only ever worked in a kitchen for so long. Like, there's nothing really else to talk about except food. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go down to Melbourne and finish my chefing degree or course because, Melbourne's the food capital, and that's when the absolute heyday of restaurants were coming up in Melbourne. So I booked a ticket and came to Melbourne.
Wow. What an experience. And like you said, in hindsight, these are really important memories, and they've really added, no doubt, to understanding restaurants as a whole. Tell me a little bit about when you fell in love with wine.
That was the second day that I moved to Melbourne. So first day I moved to Melbourne, I thought, well, until I find a chefing job, I'll get the lay of the land. So I'll work front of house just to get. So I walked around, and I've never had a resume, so I've walked around, and so I think I dropped it at the classic one-hat restaurants. I think I started at Movida at the time, and then Cumulus, and then Coda, and I can't remember the others. And they all said, look, we just need a resume. Okay. So I said, it kind of took me back a bit. And I said, well, I'm happy to do a trial. And they said, we're not allowed to do free trials anymore and all that kind of nonsense. So I had to go to my friend and ask her if I could borrow a laptop to do a resume. And anyway, so I was halfway through typing up a resume, and then Coda calls, someone from Coda, Tom Hunter called from Coda, and he goes, if you're still interested, if you want to come in and do a trial tonight, that'd be fantastic. So and then every half an hour after that, every restaurant had asked, the restaurant manager had called up and asked if I wanted to go and do a trial, which I thought was pretty funny. So still to this day, I still don't have a resume, but so I went to Coda, and this was in 2000, the end of 2013, the start of 2014. And Coda in 2013 was you think back with memories, but at that point in time, it was one of the greatest restaurants that you could ever work in, and I think attend as a diner. It was dark. There was a lot going on. There's a kind of semi-open kitchen, but the quality of the staff that were there it changed my whole perception of front of house. And you have to remember, in Brisbane, it's probably changed now, but back then, the first question you'd get asked front of house was, well, what are you studying, or what are you doing after hospitality? Because there was no real careers, or unless you own the restaurant, there was no real incentive to just be a really good worker. And that's so down here, where you had all these career hospitality guys all in the front of house, and you'd finish after your first night, and everyone would get these pretty amazing tips because the service was so amazing. And then we would be buying bottles of wine off the wine list for tasting, and you're sitting down with some of what you thought, because you just moved to Melbourne, all these cool, amazing young guys and girls who are into their wine, and it's just a lifestyle, and it's so addictive. So I think probably from the first week of starting at Coda, I got that first addiction of front of house, going back to front of house, and realizing that wine is actually a thing. This is cool. And I remember someone asking, do I have a favorite wine? And I drank wine before, but nothing to this level. And Travis Howe, I think at the time, he goes, well, this is one of my favorite producers, and here, have a glass of this. And it was the Francois Chardin, and a Chenin Blanc, and I had it, and I go, I really just can't figure out what this is. As in, this is so amazing that I really need to understand how to figure this out, because it's so complex in the fact that there's so many flavors going on in the glass, yet I've got no words to describe it. which is arguably one of the hardest things about wine, is that you can taste everything. Everyone's got the same amount of taste buds, but to actually be able to describe it is arguably one of the hardest things to do. And so from that addiction, and those guys then would go into late night, BYO, Chinatown, and then would go here and go there. And on your days off, you'd be going to a different restaurant every week. So Michael Bartholomew, who has Coda, he always has this ethos that the restaurant's the party and the atmosphere, and then just provide really amazing food and wine and do it in a format that's so casual that everyone just feels like they're welcomed, and why would you want to go anywhere else? And that really struck me. That was fantastic. That was just such a good way for me to see hospitality and restaurants, because the fancier restaurants that I'd gone to were so stale, and the guys serving you were pretending like they weren't going to ride their bike home, and that kind of atmosphere. Whereas this was, we're all wearing, there was no uniforms. Everyone's wearing sneakers, and you had an apron, but then you were talking to customers about having a half glass of Riesling before you even start your bottle of wine, and then blah, 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 all this kind of thing. So it was so addictive to get into wine at Coda. And
I think the institutions like Coda, I've always kind of thought there's a saying like for the love of it. And when you look around places like Coda, the guests are there for the love of it, the staff are there for the love of it, and everybody is just vibing off the fact that, they're interested, and there is no pretense. And so I think that somewhere like Coda, it attracted great somms because it has such a great vibe when you walk in there. It feels very Melbourne, but it also feels like you said, like it's everybody's place, which is really cool.
Correct. And another thing that I really learned there was that you can be casual, but you have to be the most knowledgeable person on the food menu and wine, because people will cut through that instantly. You can't just be charming without any knowledge behind you. So I think that is the absolute weapon of not having to raise your level of dining. It's just having that knowledge behind you in a really casual setting.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's almost like a secret weapon, you seem flippant and casual and fun, and then you just whip out this like crazy amount of knowledge about something, and it kind of then it's the whole package. But it's funny when I read through, especially as you said that you don't have a resume, and still to this day, if I read through some of the notes from your bio and from what I know of you, almost like dating, I was like, yep, I love some of these lines that you're throwing at me. They absolutely resonate with me. You fell in love with Chenin Blanc. I'm like, tick, 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 tick. We're going to get along just fine.
It is. It's the Somm secret wine, isn't it?
God,
it really is.
It's so good. I think it's interesting that you talk about that you can't be a strong sommelier without being a good section waiter first. That's something that really resonates with me, and I drilled into anyone that I came across that wanted to be a sommelier. Tell me about why you think that.
So Coda was an absolute beast of a machine of a restaurant, and it was incredibly high paced, and it was probably one or two tables larger in each section that you should have ever done. So you're constantly running, but you held your section and did everything, and then you had the somms, the support, and working with even Gavin Creming was the sommelier I worked most with. And Travis Howard coming over the top as well in certain shifts. But even just at a table, if your eyes weren't up and looking around the room to see what your next move was, they would be onto it to ask you why you hadn't had your eyes up. So you could make contact to see what bottle of wine they'd just sold 3 tables over. And just the understanding of speed, and you're still providing amazing service, but you can only do that if you're in control of your section. you can only be in control of your section if you've got your speed and you know what the next move is. And it really is a bit of an art form. And you walk into a restaurant, a busy restaurant, and you see, it's almost like a ballet, and you see 20 wait staff just walking as fast as they can, and the customers, and no one gets bumped into. Everyone's carrying plates of food, everyone's got glasses, everyone's got everything in their hands, and everyone is just, there's just a bit of a symphony of what's actually going. And that's not just by luck, that is training, that's section waiting, doing it properly. And you can't be a sommelier and get stuck into a conversation at a table if a customer is looking at the wine list and wants to order a bottle of wine. So your timings, and it's timings of conversation, it's timings of customer reading. You can't you can't be a good section waiter. But before you're even a section waiter, you can't be a section waiter without being a good food runner. You can't be a good food runner before you can even kind of greet someone at the front door. There's all of these systems in place that you kind of get progressed through. So I think there's in restaurants, you've kind of got a sporting. It's almost like a sport, and everyone's got individual talents. The front door is by far one of the hardest talents. Food running, to be able to explain a food in a way to a customer that they can understand it, and then being a section waiter where you're actually a salesperson, but you're doing it in a way not necessarily for a financial reason, but for a customer experience. And then over the top, we're lucky enough to have a restaurant that has sommeliers, which is a very rare thing. And so to have all that work at the same time, you can't have one person you can't have a sommelier who's not good in a section waiter and doesn't understand it. All the cards kind of fall over from there.
It's so true. It's such a team sport, like you said. And when I think you have an understanding of what all the jobs entail and then how they work together, I found that there was empathy, there was knowledge, there was trust between your teammates and yourself if you had an understanding of what they go through and how they do it and what are their challenges throughout the shift. And it just makes for a good hospitality professional, doesn't it? I mean, I just think that really in any role that we have, we really should go through the training of kind of stepping up into those levels. And it's not possible for all places, I understand that. But I certainly can point out and see a real professional that has done lots of different roles. You can really tell because, like you said, they seem to have this innate understanding of how everything is operating and what is needed at the time.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. It's a very beautiful industry to be a part of. But to get to being a sommelier, I think coffee and milk, nothing really changes. I think chefing, I've got so much respect for every chef, but for me personally, once you understood tasting and technique, the journey was just too far for me to become a very good chef, and then to be a really good waiter was great. And it probably honestly took me about 2 years to really refine that art form, which I think a lot of people don't really understand, that you need to stay in a venue, in a section, to really understand not just the highs but all the lows as well. And that teamwork that you go back to before, you have a really hard service. And at the end of the service, no matter how hard it is, you're going to sit down and have a glass of wine and, turn to your colleagues and go, wow, that was pretty tough, So it's almost like therapy at the end of the night as well. But then, you get to a point where it becomes a bit mundane, the same thing, and then you start using the same words to special tables, and it's, you maybe start going out a little bit more, so you're a little bit more hungover the next day, and because you can just go through the motions. And then Gavin Creming and Travis Howe really forced me to get through my wine education, and from there I had this, because there was a really beautiful wine training either weekly or bi-weekly at Coda. So I had all the fundamentals and I knew everything about, I guess, more so the producers, but I didn't have the background knowledge of how everything works mechanically, which I always relate learning. As someone says, well, where did you learn all about wine? And I say it's probably easier to compare it with music, where you can go and study music and you can understand how to write music and how it all works, but that doesn't tell you anything about composers or the producers or the artists. And it's the exact same thing with wine. So you go and learn all the fundamentals and how wine works and what grape is legally grown in this area and all that, which is fantastic. But then it doesn't tell you anything about the actual producers. Which you and I both know that we get a little bit excited if you taste a wine that doesn't typically taste from that region. And that doesn't come out of the textbook, that comes from the producer. So I think just the level of knowledge that you need to do to understand a bottle of wine is remarkable. And winemakers die, wine styles change, food menus change. There's different levels of wine. There's different prices. So I think that whole mundane of just being in a section waiter, somming really appealed to me. And to be honest, I didn't think I would ever go down the somming path, because I saw the hard work Trav and Gav and the guys did, and they were tasting, and on their days off they're going to trade tastings, and it's constant. And you try to keep up early days in a month cycle of, it's almost a 7-day a week job, and you just see how many emails they come through, and you go, why would you want to do this? So it really took me a long time to get to it, but Gavin Cremming came down to Stokehouse in St Kilda after we just rebuilt, after the fire, and he convinced me to come down here.
What an amazing spot to be. I'm sure you hear that all the time, and I hope that you do enjoy it. But I want to know, just because you're in the position you're in now, if you were to hire a sommelier today, what are the main skill sets that you're looking for? We know it's a lot of work, but what are some of the things that would stand out for a candidate that you would say, you know what, I want to give them a go?
This is one of the trickiest things to hire a sommelier, because at the end of the day, the amount of brilliant hard work that happens in the wineries, and all the by the time it gets to the restaurant and sold to the consumer, the amount of hard work that goes on there, all our job is to really highlight all of that hard work that's happening. And I don't think there's that much information that's not coming from hidden agendas to learn about wine if you're just a general everyday consumer. So I think our job is just to translate all of that beautiful hard work that they're doing. So to find a junior sommelier who, I guess, understands more the purpose of being a sommelier. I think knowing a lot about wine is definitely something that you need to have, but it's not as essential what day of the week they pluck their leaves and what aspects as a junior somm. But to actually understand that what you're doing is you're just providing an experience to the customer, but you want them to take away a little bit of knowledge that they can then repeat to their friends as if they already knew that. So you kind of, I try to tell the juniors, the most important thing is the customer experience, and the only way that you can deliver that beautiful customer experience is through knowledge. So you can somm at a very early level, but if you get a customer that wants to talk to you about the intricacies of Sicilian white wines and you don't know it, it doesn't mean that you've done a bad job. It just means that you've missed out on a beautiful conversation that you could have had with a customer who knows everything about Sicilian whites, and you guys could share that conversation about that wine conversation. So and then on the flip side of thing, if you come in with a lot of knowledge, but you don't have that personable element with the customer, you can just come off that you're just rattling off pH levels and acidity and all the things that just confuse customers. That it's really easy to make yourself sound knowledgeable in wine because you can just rattle off some of the intricacies in wine, which again I think that just comes down to a lack of being personable.
You've really highlighted two amazing points there. I think that I agree with you. It does, because wine can attract people that are quite scientific and quite nerdy about the world of wine. And there's lots of jobs out there in wine that can really benefit from. But to be a sommelier, there's this complete other side of things, like you said, about passion and personality and care that you want to deliver something for the customer, so care of the customer experience. And I just think that, wine, there's lots and lots of roles in the wine world, but wanting to be a sommelier is only one of those roles. And so it's not just about loving wine, it has to be about loving telling stories and spreading, like you said, these incredible people behind it that work their ass off and for chump change to try and produce the best product they can. So you really kind of nailed that one. I agree.
Correct, and I agree with you. And there's different levels of restaurants. So I get Stokehouse, as much as we've got a really amazing wine program, it is all about having fun first of all and feeling comfortable and then having that beautiful conversation. But there's so many restaurants out there that wine is that upper level conversation, and it can be served in a serious manner, which is beautiful. But then there's wine repping where you need to know more than the somms, and then there's beautiful aspects within the wine industry, and it's a very tight knit, amazing industry to be a part of. So if you are one of those beautiful wine nerds and you love the technical elements of it, there is a spot for you in wine. It's just sometimes maybe not at certain restaurants.
When you go out to dine, what impresses you about wine service?
I love this question. For me, is one, somming without the wine list and just actually just having an open conversation with a sommelier, and just because we all do it, we all test our colleagues and our peers and other restaurants out just to test their knowledge a little bit. And I love just I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to food and tastings and timings, because you don't go to a restaurant because you're hungry. You go there for the experience, and each dish probably matches with with wines. And so I just kind of tell them, look, this is what I'm thinking of eating in this order, and I'm happy to have this much time in between. What would you recommend? And then just seeing what they come up with. I love it because it's a completely different wine list. They've got a different palate to a certain degree. They might have different suppliers, and then they've got a different look on the food as well. So if I trust that I guess I have to trust that they understand how to dine as well and how to drink. And then once I trust that, then I'm open. Just I can try everything. Good somming for me is, hey, I'm looking at this bottle, but I've had it before. Is there anything else that you can recommend that you think is just as good? And then just seeing the way that they're thinking and ticking over, and just a couple of suggestions they're saying, I think it's a beautiful opportunity to just open up a conversation about wine with someone else. And then in Melbourne, we're pretty once you get that good service, you tend to just put that in your wheelhouse of restaurants, and then you go back there. And if you go to a place that maybe you don't get that, then you maybe skip it next time around and wait till a friend invites you back to that restaurant. But when you choose the restaurant down here, you're kind of choosing it off the people that are working there, and then the food, and then the service, and then all of that.
I think that exact sentence that you just said is a wonderful advice for people going into a restaurant to try and open a conversation. If you can identify a wine on a list that you've enjoyed, maybe you look and go, oh yeah, I've had that Standish Shiraz before. I loved it. And you can point that out to a sommelier and say, hey, I've had this before, but I'm not up for spending $300. Is there something like this? It's a great opportunity for people to be able to just open a conversation, but also, let them kind of understanding what you like. So that is just a perfect way to open conversations, I think, with sommelier. And it gives you also a place where you're not going to get, you've already established a price, or you've established that you're not going to, you're not up for spending a couple of grand on a bottle. So that's amazing. I think that, as somebody that is so passionate about being a sommelier, I have had lots of experience, and I know lots of people that have had not such great experiences with sommeliers. And it can be really damaging to their trust in ever doing it again. So when I hear that someone's been to a restaurant, they've had an amazing experience like they have with you, it just makes my heart sing, because I think we've got one more person or a couple more people that are open to trusting sommeliers and open to going on the journey and have a whole new way of dining ahead of them. So congratulations on being one of those people that just keeps extending beautiful dining experiences to people. It's so important, and it is the future of Australian wine service. You've got a big trip coming up, some little intel that I found out about. Where are you headed?
I am going with the new junior sommelier of Stokehouse, who just got 100% on his WSET exam, and he is the future of wine and hospitality, and I am trying to teach him about the art of dining and the legacy, one of Stokehouse, but of sommeliers in general, and how beautiful hospitality is. And he's a 24-year-old from yesterday. We are doing 2 weeks in New York, and we are only eating and drinking. And the difference between America and Australia is America, for some reason, you're allowed to BYO in every restaurant, even at the 3-star places. So we have a 2-week eating and drinking experience in New York, and then we have a week in Texas because we love slow braised barbecue. So we're going to go out to those old shacks that have the big smokers, and then a little bit of time with some margaritas and tacos in the heat of Mexico before we get through the rest of winter, and then we're back into summer at Stokehouse, which summer at Stokehouse is it is amazing, and it is intense, and it is a environment where you've got 2 minutes to talk about Grand Cru Chablis before then you have to go and talk about beautiful Mornington Peninsula Pinot Gris, and then jump over to somewhere in the world, and you've literally only got 90 seconds per conversation, so it's maximum impact. So winter's our downtime. So my wife, who travels for work, and thankfully she's not in hospitality, so we that's, I think, what keeps us together, and she travels a lot for work, so I think she's not too upset that I'm going with Tom. Well,
Wil, I thought I liked you before you told me about this upcoming trip, and now I almost hate you. But
you're more than welcome to come. Anyone is more than the more the merrier.
I have to say, look, anyone that's listening out there that's thinking that, perhaps they'd like to be a sommelier, that is why. That is why you should be a sommelier. Trips like that, where you get to just, like you said, learn the art of dining. I mean, what an amazing experience. 100% on his WSET, so he 100% deserves that. Well done. And look at the fruits of his labor. So that sounds amazing. Texas barbecue, margaritas. I mean, stop it. Just stop it.
I know. It's a once in, and I'm at the point that maybe my last trip before little footprints are running around the house. So for me, it's the last hurrah for for my travel days, I think, in this capacity.
Well, it will be. I'm sure there'll be lots of travel on your radar still with, the opportunities for buying trips and travel, but it will be a very different experience. I'm glad that you've got this. I think it's really important that you have a bit of a last hurrah, and I'm really excited for your young sommelier going along with you. People like yourself, even in the smallest capacities, and what you do every day makes a huge impact on people that are up and coming. And by leading by example, we are just in really good hands in Australia. And I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you today. I do have one last question, which we'll tick off fairly quickly. And that's, if you could only drink 3 drinks for the rest of your life, what are they going to be and why?
Oh, this is such a...
I know, it's awful, isn't it? I should change it.
Hard question. And you can't ask a sommelier that. It's the hardest thing ever. So, I mean...
Today. It's just for today. So you can change it tomorrow.
Today, I'll go in the order of... So it has to be coffee. I think coffee is better than morning yoga. For me, I've got a little dog. Getting a morning coffee and walking around the park, rain, hail or shine, and then having another coffee before you start your tasting, and then a pre-service coffee, and then an afternoon coffee. It has to be coffee is number one. One, because it is so delicious, but it also... It connects you to community. It connects you to the local cafe. It connects you to going out and catching up with people outside of alcohol, or if someone's giving up alcohol. So definitely coffee. The other two have to be wine, and I did put so much thought process in there. One would be Riesling. It has to be German Riesling, or let's just call it Old World Riesling, because you can go as versatile with oysters, or you could go with, a King George whiting with sweet corn, or you can even bulk it out and go into a rich, kind of powerful fish dish. So I'm going to say Riesling, because I couldn't live without Riesling. And I hate when somms say that they don't want to choose red Burgundy, because I love red Burgundy, and I'm going back into the phase in red Burgundy. But what I will say is, I'll say Burgon level red Burgundy. And because Burgon level, anyone who's got money doesn't drink Burgon because it's too high risk. And if you know your stuff about wine, and you know producers, and you know declassification, or you know a good vintage, or you know how long it should last, or you want to see where the evolution of where Premier Cru and Grand Cru are going to take, you get all of that information out of Burgon. And it's always at a price point that if it is good, you never had to pay for it.
Mm. Yeah, very well said. I could easily take, like you said, Bourgogne level Burgundy from some great producers and drink them any day of the week, special occasions, not special occasions, and be very, very happy with it. So,
but imagine being on a desert island and you haven't chosen red Burgundy and you've chosen another red wine, which is fantastic. You're always in the back of your mind as a sommelier going, yeah, but, I kind of would really like a little glass of Burgundy. We all say that we don't want to say Burgundy because it's the easy answer, but living the rest of your life without a glass of red Burgundy, come on.
Sad. Actually, correct. I had to answer this question the other day, and I thought, no, I want to really say an Australian wine. And then I was like, don't be a dick. What would you take? What is your honest answer? Say your honest answer. It's hypothetical. It's not going to ever happen. So just say what you want. And I definitely went top shelf though, but that was because it was a hypothetical. But
yes, of course. If I had the money, I would probably only drink top shelf. But and don't get me wrong, I love Australian wine, and I honestly think Australian Chardonnay isn't just competing with Burgundy. It is actually meeting it, and if not, almost surpassing it, especially on a level of investment. And Australian wine for me is when you want to just enjoy wine, because you know exactly typically what you're going to get and you're going to enjoy it. I think it's the safest and best financial decision you can make in wine, if I can say that.
I agree with you completely on Chardonnay, and I do agree with you. In terms of quality, in terms of pristine fruit, in terms of the money you're spending, it is hard to look elsewhere. I totally agree. And like you said, consistency, knowing that, it's not going to be corked or oxidized or, bottle shocked. I totally agree with you. Aussie wine is where it's at. And
and typically if they make good wines, they're not normal people. And those are the kind of people that you want to go and have a glass of wine with. Normal people making wine, typically in my experience, don't make very good wine. The ones outside, and to interpret that how you like, but it is also building this beautiful relationship between sommeliers and winemakers as well.
I agree. And I also would say that anyone that is good at hospitality is also not normal. So that is where we align. Wil, it has been such a pleasure. We've cracked an hour. I could easily go for another and chat to you. I did think I'd finish with saying I've written your resume and it's going on a T-shirt. It says, I know stuff, I have skills, I bring drinks.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, if you make 3 copies, I think that's your ticket to our holiday if you want to come.
Don't tempt me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you again for having me on here.
It's been fantastic. Maybe we'll do another one sometimes. Thank you so much, Wil. Cheers to you.
My pleasure. See you. Bye.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.